I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
I'm Barbara Hunt Davis, born in Algiers, better known as Point, or New Orleans probably, it'd be the most popular place. That's where I grew up and was educated until college, and then I went to college in Hammond, Louisiana, but got the best of the Cajun culture where I lived, where I grew up, and my people. And once you've met them, you got your hug and your handshake, you're in for the rest of your life. You're just part of that family. And probably the most predominant thing about me is I'm going to talk to you. Whether you listen or not, I'm going to talk to you and try with my very, very most powerful self get you to tell me about you. Because that's how we come to love each other, when we know about each other. I have one sister who thought she was my mother. I had two mothers. I had Celeste, who was a sweet little Cajun lady who spent all her time in the kitchen or the garden. And then I had my second sister, which was Jerry. And it was one of those situations with her where she was in the room and I walked in, she would say, what do you want? Like I didn't belong there. And it wasn't until I was an adult and I realized she was there for me. She had my first birthday party. She gave it, she told me what to wear. First she sewed it and then she told me when to wear it. But she contributed greatly to my upbringing. Coming up, preschool through elementary school, my grandmother lived with us, Nora. Aunt Bess lived with us. Aunt Bess was my godmother and my inspiration for anything and everything.
Your mom Celeste, you said she's a Cajun woman. Where did she grow up?
In the swamp. In the swamp out of Thibodaux, Louisiana. And she's the one that told me what a coon ass was. That's the people that only see that part of the coon. They don't see any other part of the coon. So, and that she was one of those. She was hardworking. My Celeste The only place you could get to the home where she grew up was by a train. And the train used to go to the sugarcane fields. It'd go to the Atchafalaya Basin and pick up the residents and take them to the cane fields. And they'd do their job, whatever their job was at the sugar refinery. But her dad passed away when she was 11 or 12. And she and 5 siblings moved to New Orleans. And they all went to work. All the siblings and the mother went to work because they gave up their jobs at the sugar refinery. And it was when they went to New Orleans that Celeste and Bessie, my dad's sister, made best friends with my mother. And they were 12. And they were working sewing lingerie for Vanity Fair. Kind of like a sweatshop, I guess. But because they were smarter than the average bear, they ended up working for the telephone company. And this happened before they were 16. So I like to say I was from pretty strong stock. You know, they had survival techniques. But Aunt Bessie and my mother could get into more trouble. They, was it then? Prohibition came along and they liked their cocktail. They liked their happy hour. So they were drinking pure grain alcohol, but growing all kind of green mint juleps. That's what they made, mint juleps.
Yeah.
And they decided they needed chicken. Food was hard to come by, but the neighbors, the next property had chickens. So Celeste and Bessie decided we were going to have chicken for dinner after a few mint juleps. And they got some bread and they coaxed the chicken off the neighbor's property onto our property to a spot that you couldn't see. And they had watched my grandmother, who lived with us, wring the necks of the chickens, so they swore they knew what they were doing. And I can remember sitting on the porch with my dress covering my knees and my feet saying, "Don't do that, don't do that." And they'd grab that chicken, circle around that chicken and go walking around the yard. Finally, after I kept saying, "Don't do that anymore, don't do that anymore." So I called my dad at his place of business, which that was a big no-no. But I told him that we needed help at home. So he sent someone out and did a hatchet job on the chicken. And it ended up, nobody ate chicken that night. We ended up ditching the chicken. But those are the kind of childhood memories. And the Cajuns just blow that off like, okay, we'll come up with something else. My Aunt Bess was my inspiration for education. Like she always said, she wanted to take that course on procrastination, but never got around to it. I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
What about Papa Hunt? How'd he grow up?
My dad was, well, yeah, I got off of that. My mother's father died at 12. They went to the city. My dad's parents got a divorce, and it was oil field was booming at that time. So at 9, my dad was abandoned in an oil field, but he was a water boy. So he had a barn to sleep in and tips and brought water to the workers in the oil fields. And about that time, he was a teenager. And he was always very good with his hands. He could fix anything, he could build anything. And he got a car. Didn't run, but he got it running. And he was the first and only, I found out later, taxi driver from College Station to Texas A&M. And he lived in his cab. But that's the way he made money. And then he got a lead with Ford Motor Company and went to New Orleans and saw his mom and Aunt Bess and my mom, and he married Aunt Bess's best friend.
So he was born in Texas? Where?
Port Arthur.
Oh.
Oh, no, the Groves. Isn't it really called the Groves?
Yeah, yeah.
Rumor has it that sometimes you have little temper tantrums.
My daughter Susan has a picture of my punishment when I was literally out of control, screaming, kicking. My dad had an ice truck. He delivered ice. For those of you that don't know about ice boxes, and that was my punishment. That was my place. When I was kicking and screaming and arms and legs and everything going, he would jam me between the bumper and the radiator. And he'd say, have all the fits you want, but let me know when you're finished. And I can remember just going to exhaustion, just passing out from screaming and yelling and sweating from being, but I got my temper under control anyway, because I didn't want to go back there. Once or twice there was enough to teach me a lesson that keep your mouth shut and go have your fit someplace else. 1115 Casa Calva Street. Oh yeah, and it's like a rock.
Yeah.
It's been through several hurricanes, and the only sad part about that was, I don't remember which hurricane it was, the contractor talked my dad into taking off the slate roof. They had a slate roof and they had to get a composite, which changed their insurance and everything.
Yeah.
No, but the walls were solid. They had a fire. It was a shotgun, a double shotgun. And the fire turned the whole inside of the house black, but it never flamed. But my dad was a character. He was a man's man. And if you wanted to go hunting or fishing, he's the guy you wanted to go to. Because you were going to place a bet, and then he'd just BS you until you just were backed in a corner. And he was going to win, and he made up wonderful stories. He had a passion, and only going to school through 9 years old, he had a passion for reading. Zane Grey, like your dad, Zane Grey novels, National Geographic, he would just cherish it for months and months. So he was, just like Aunt Bess, was self-educated and did that. Practical Joker, Halloween time, Aunt Bess and Celeste, dressing in my dad's sweatsuit, 2 women in one sweatsuit. It's pretty, you have to get a mental picture of that, 2 feet, 2 arms on each side. They were hilarious.
We're a mess together.
My dad worked for Ford Motor Company, married my mom. I think they were both 16 or 17. And so my sister was really in their generation because they had her when they were married a year. So there's not that much, we're not 20 years difference in there. Working for Ford Motor Company, and then he loved trucks. And he had a car and he bought another truck. And he met this man that had the ice house where they made those 100-pound blocks of ice. And he made his own ice route. But he did it mostly with restaurants. And in New Orleans, every neighborhood has a local grocery bar sandwich place. And those are the places he serviced, were these bars. Here in Texas, you call them ice houses, I think. And he would go to this one particular one, and I guess because I was such a temper tantrum kid, I got to go on the ice truck with him. And before I could walk, the housekeeper used to go on the truck too to hold me, to get me out of the house, so my sweet Celeste could have peace and quiet. So we'd go to this one bar, and I can still smell the smells of sitting on that bar, big tall bar, with my poor boy sandwich and my chips and my Barks root beer. And he would be sitting at the poker table, right next to it, having his sandwich, and I would watch him play cards. Well, one day the card kept going and going and going. It was back and forth between my dad and this guy. And this guy put up his business, which was a car repair business. And they went for broke, and he won. He won the business. Yeah, yeah. I was impressed with that.
And how long did he have it?
30 some odd years. Because he liked being his own boss. And he was, everybody knew Buddy Hunt. Buddy Hunt was just in Algiers. He was a Santa Claus at Christmas. He was a charter member of the Masons. He was a charter member of community service.
Lions Club?
My sister she was so rotten. She went to business school, graduated from business school, and talked him into being her payroll clerk bookkeeper, so she was the bookkeeper. And he filled her a cute little office at the service station. We had to work there. I had to work there in the summers because that's when they had full service. And you had to clean the headlights and the windshield and check the oil and make sure it was full and do the drink box, one of those Coca-Cola things that you open like that. And all those wood Coke cases with glass bottles. It was hard work. And then he taught me so much about fishing, he taught me so much about hunting. And I think the neatest part of Betty and Celeste and Aunt Bess, she was so free to have fun, to celebrate. Nothing, and I never ever, as my children, never had a curfew. The only thing I heard was, don't do anything that's going to embarrass you or me. And so we were allowed to live life. Oh, and one of his funny hunting stories, I don't know why this popped in my head, would tell me stories when he came back from his trip. They got lost in the foggy, misty, drippy woods and couldn't get out, and it was dark. And they finally stumbled upon a cabin, and there was this humming coming for the cabin. And they didn't know whether to go in or not. They didn't know what to do. So they stood outside, and the humming would come and go. And finally somebody got brave enough to light a lantern. And they went in, and there was a skull on the bunk bed, just a skull, singing, "I ain't got nobody."
Yeah, that sounds like a Buddy Hunt story.
Oh yeah, and his story of the nursery rhymes when the fox ate the grapes. In his story, the fox got drunk and created havoc. I'm out of gas. I can't think, y'all. Stuttering. First time to go to a bar in the French Quarter was my 16th birthday. And I got to invite my best friend, and she had a date, and I had a date, and our chaperones, well, my caretaker, second mother, my sister and her husband, and we went to Pat O'Brien's. And it's when the piano bars were so famous, and we sang college fight songs all night. That was my first trip to the Quarter. And then after I got to college, a lot of the musicians that went to the college I went to would play a jam session. So the big thing to do was to go after hours, which meant after 2 o'clock in the morning, and hear the best music. What's close to being in New Orleans? Hammond was, they celebrated the same culture. Celebrations were the same. Holidays with my family were awesome. We have such a good time. I call it a good time, look at me. We eat all day, everything that you're not supposed to eat all day. And when we don't eat, we drink. I met Bob, he came to college. I met him at college. And I was a junior, I think. And he was a vet. He signed up for 4 years in the Air Force so he could get the GI Bill, because he definitely wanted a college education, which I'm so proud he did in 3 years, which was unheard of. And it was hard to come back after 4 years in Alaska, to come back to a southern college. And he was persistent, though. He went to all the tutoring he could possibly go to. But we both loved to dance. And that's when we found out we were good dance partners, then it developed from there. And the hardest thing I ever did was break off that engagement, but that guy went to El Paso and I didn't know when I was going to see him again, so. And he wasn't a good dancer, so.
Boom, check off the list.
It's something I didn't know about Bob. He was a good dancer, but he was also the drum major of a very prestigious Catholic boys' high school. And he kept that hidden for me till 20 years, I guess. And my daughter decided she wanted to try out as a cheerleader, but she couldn't twirl a baton. He said, well, can you get a baton? And she said, yeah, I can get one. He said, I can show you what to do. It was incredible. He could do what, he could send it so high and hit it with his foot and catch it.
It's crazy.
Even in his 40s, he could still, and that's when his mom and dad, he threatened anybody if they told me. In fact, Jack Davis has his baton. But he took Susan out on the patio and did that baton, and she was, I mean, her mouth was just hanging open. He was, so many things we didn't know about him that, I don't know why it was a big secret. Inner city. Any city, right off of the French Quarter on Esplanade Avenue.
Oh, really?
The only playground he had was school playgrounds. There was, nobody had a basketball goal. And they had those two little things of cement. They lived in a shotgun house, but the driveway was just two little skinny. You could any grass you had, you could do with the scissors. And he didn't know how to drive when we became interested in each other, and that was, we were getting married. And we couldn't leave the reception because he couldn't get the car in gear. And we were driving on that Lake Pontchartrain bridge. And they realized after we got on the bridge that Bob was driving. And John said, Bobby, we all called him Bobby, how long have you been driving? He said, about 10 minutes. And we're on this 2-lane bridge over a 26-mile lake.
He had never driven before.
Oh, God.
He did good. Oh, and we were on our honeymoon, in which I drove most of the way, away from the reception hall, too. Well, I kind of sat in the passenger seat and did the clutch, you know, directed him how to shift gears. But we go sightseeing one day on our honeymoon. We were in Alabama. We went to some kind of gardens and some kind of Bellingraph Gardens. And on our tour, the guide we had were 3 little nuns, and we kind of hooked up with them and made friends with them, and of course, it was my good Catholic boy to show off. So we come to the end of this tour, and it's at the top of a hill. Well, we're in a standard drive car, and there's a red light. And how do you stop and go with the clutch and the gas pedal? We hadn't approached that thing yet. He let those nuns think that we broke down. And they come toddling up to the car, and they said, the light had changed like 3 times. And I kept screaming, let me drive, get out, let me drive. He wouldn't budge. And he let him push us to the next gas station, through that left turn, onto this highway and into a gas station, and went over and thanked him that he was sure he could fix whatever. He said, I forgot about that story. When I said, you're not going to let them push us. But they want to.
They want to.
They want to. His dad worked for a steamship line, and Bob was also a standout basketball player for St. Aloysius. So the steamship line hired Bob so he could be on their basketball team.
That's funny.
And his dad worked, had something to do with adjusting freight rates for Sealand shipping, kind of thing.
So he worked out.
But Bob worked there during high school whenever he could, so he could play on that basketball team. And he played on an Air Force team too. He was offered a scholarship to LSU out of high school, but it was too far from home. And he figured he could get his education quicker if he signed up 4 years in the Air Force and served his time. And then he used to get the GI Bill, which wasn't enough to make it from paycheck to paycheck. So he and John Cato and a couple of his friends would make a blood run. They'd go to Baton Rouge and sell their blood to supplement the income, which required a lot of beer drinking, so I don't know. I don't know.
Hopefully that was replenishing the blood, not before.
Yes. On the way home, there was a place that made shrimp pizzas and draft beer that was, I think most of the blood money went to.
Pizza and draft beer.
Yeah.
Laisse les bons temps rouler. Laisse les bons temps rouler. Laisse les mille aller. Laisse les bons temps rouler. Laisse les bons temps rouler. Tout partout dans la moyenne. Oh, dis-lui. Dis-toi tes mains hier au soir. Eh, dis-lui. Dis-toi tes mains hier au soir. Laisse les bons temps rouler. Laisse les mille aller. Soir. Oh, petite fille, quoi qu'arrive, mais y'a le soir. Hey, petite fille, quoi qu'arrive, mais y'a le soir. Laisse les bons temps rouler. Laisse les bons temps rouler. laisse les bâtons rouler, laisse les mille aller, chat. Bâtons rouler, on donne les rangs coton, on donne les rangs maillis, on donne les rangs coton, chat. Laisse les bâtons rouler, on donne les rangs patates.